The Veiled Fire, the story of Pakistan's nuclear quest, read and published by Mr. Books. A story that haunts history, that flickers in the night of a nation's memory. Here is the tale of Pakistan's nuclear journey, of a people's desire to rise from ashes, smoldering with the yearning to be sovereign, secure, and equal in the equal. Dangerous dance of nations. Pakistan's nuclear saga did not begin as an arms race, nor did it commence in the laboratories of learned men, nor inside the parliament's echoing chambers. It was, instead, a story born in the collective psyche, the anguish of 1947, the wounds of division, and the echo of cannons across the Himalayas in 1971. It was, at the core, Pakistan's struggle with destiny and dignity, the struggle of a young nation facing adversities that threatened its very existence. As the nuclear age blossomed with deadly petals in other lands, Pakistan stood at a precipice rival to India, misunderstood by the world and compelled by an unsteady sense of insecurity. Its scientific dream was not merely to grasp at power, but to shield its people from subjugation, to raise a bulwark against arrogance and violence. The Veiled Fire traces the journey from trauma to triumph, from isolation to international contention. As Pakistan, guided by ambition, haunted by fear, and threatened by sanctions, marched toward nuclear capability. Here are not only the scientists and generals with steely resolve, but also the dreamers, the doubters, and the architects of compromise, lurking in corridors of confusion and hope. This is a journey not of uranium and plutonium, nor merely of secrets and subterfuge, but of the very soul of a nation, a longing for acceptance, a demand for respect, and the will to wield the most fearsome tool humanity has ever known. The chapters ahead do not glorify nor condemn. They strive to reveal the human story behind the headlines. The Veiled Fire is the chronicle of ambition shadowed by anxiety, of national pride tinged with peril. Fear, love, resentment, sacrifice, and hope all are woven into the fabric of this tale. As we journey into embers and ashes, dreams and dilemmas, let us remember that behind every weapon, every scientist's vision, there are human hearts trembling, with purpose, longing for peace in a world set ablaze. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1. Embers of Fear, the Geopolitical Furnace. In the dead of a sweltering night, the city of Karachi slumbered, yet the nation's heart beat with anxiety. Outside the monuments and mosques, whispers of enemies and allies drifted through the humid air, the ghosts of colonial pasts, shadows of border conflicts, the uncertainties of a fractured subcontinent. Pakistan, barely 3 decades old, marched through a labyrinth of regional rivalries that would forever shape its identity and its nuclear ambitions. The ashes of partition still marked the land. Families had been torn asunder, millions uprooted, relics of homes lost to a line arbitrarily drawn in haste. None could erase the memory of that pain, not the call to prayer at dawn, nor the hymns that persisted in India. From these embers was born a profound sense of vulnerability, a fear that to be Pakistani was to be perpetually on guard, always bracing for the next blow. By the 1960s, Pakistan's leaders witnessed a world transforming at breakneck speed. The chill of the Cold War pinched South Asia as Washington and Moscow pressed their interests into the region's soil. Tanks rolled on one side, diplomatic cables hung on the other. Pakistan, caught between ambitions and anxieties, treaded carefully, first aligning with the Americans, seeking security in the face of an India that grew ever more confident with Soviet support, but the alliance with the West was fraught with contradictions. American aid came with strings, and Washington's assurances often proved ephemeral, a lesson learned most harshly during the Indo-Pakistani Wars of 1965 and, most painfully, in 1971. In those days, when despair flooded the political landscape, Pakistan's faith in its allies began to erode. Already riddled with doubts, it was dealt a mortal wound when the United States stood by, reluctant and indifferent, as East Pakistan dissolved into Bangladesh, tearing families and fates apart. Not far away, India's anxieties burned. Memories of Chinese humiliation in 1962 and ongoing disputes with Pakistan over Kashmir fanned the flames of nationalism. India, under the towering presence of Indira Gandhi and the legacy of Nehru, pressed onward, investing in science, marshalling expert minds, quietly assembling the pieces for its nuclear leap. For Pakistan, the path was now inevitable. To remain a sovereign state respected, not pitied or bullied, meant matching its adversary step for step. The nuclear question, once an abstract concern voiced by intellectuals and generals, became a rallying call. It was driven not by an urge for destruction, but a grim realization. In a world that prized power above all, to possess the bomb was, simply, to exist on equal footing. The embers of fear gave way to the fire of resolve. This existential dread was not limited to leaders in Islamabad or generals in Rawalpindi. It seeped into drawing rooms, into the nervous laughter of children rehearsing what to do during blackouts, into the poetry and paranoia of a whole generation. Men of science, once dreamers, now found themselves at the front lines, not only of physics and chemistry, but of survival itself. Thus began Pakistan's fateful quest, a journey that would test the nation's spirit and shape its destiny forever, ignited in the geopolitical furnace of fear and forged in the crucible of necessity. Chapter 2. Ashes of Partition. Roots of Obsession. The scars of partition ran deep, inscribed not just upon the land, but within every soul that survived its horror. For those who endured the chaos of 1947, the violent birth of Pakistan was not only a lesson in resilience, but also a haunting reminder of their vulnerability. The trauma became collective. Pain was woven into the cultural memory, a thread that bound generations across rivers and borders. For Pakistan's architects, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and his contemporaries, the nation was to be a sanctuary after centuries of subjugation. But dreams, no matter how lofty, must contend with reality. The wounds inflicted during partition, 1 million dead, millions more displaced, left Pakistan with an inferiority complex, both militarily and psychologically, compared to its larger neighbor across the Radcliffe line. It wasn't long before the newly formed Pakistani state realized its survival would be a constant negotiation with fate. Kashmir, that heavenly valley cursed by its beauty, became the battleground where the traumas of 1947 replayed in endless cycles of conflict and ceasefires. Every skirmish, every border incident, fueled a paranoia that Pakistan's very existence hung by a thread. The leadership, battered and bruised by history, saw only one path to security: match India step by step, shadow by shadow. As a young nation, Pakistan turned to its army for salvation. In school books and city streets, the military was celebrated as both guardian and redeemer. The memory of lost battles and humiliating surrenders in 1948 and later in 1965 was not easily dismissed. Instead, it hardened into a doctrine that only extraordinary power, and perhaps something almost mythical, could guarantee survival. This obsession found fertile ground among the scientific elite as well. Young physicists, some educated abroad, returned with dreams of progress, but were quickly swept up by the urgency of defense. The possibility that India could harness nuclear power for military ends was not a distant nightmare. It was an immediate threat that magnified the scars of partition, transforming them into a rallying cry for technological parity. The emotional resonance of partition would shape every decision henceforth. Scientific endeavors were couched in the language of redemption. Nuclear research, once pursued for peaceful purposes in the 1950s, became increasingly militarized after India's own program gained momentum. With each step, Pakistan's sense of isolation grew deeper, cemented by diplomatic setbacks and economic hurdles. Internationally, Pakistan walked a lonely road. The world's powers, while eager to use Islamabad for their strategic games, rarely offered true friends. Mutual suspicion between Pakistan and India became a fixture of global diplomacy, a tension both policed and exploited by international actors, further deepening Islamabad's resolve to pursue weapons as a guarantee against abandonment. Into this cauldron of paranoia, pain, and pride, Pakistan began its nuclear quest, not merely to join the club of atomic nations, but to erase the humiliation of partition. The bomb was not simply a weapon. It was an answer, an antidote, a promise that never again would Pakistan be powerless in the face of overwhelming force. The ashes of partition continued to smolder, fueling policies and ambitions. Through the cracked lens of past trauma, every threat loomed larger, every risk seemed existential. In every spinning centrifuge and clandestine meeting, in every sleepless night for scientists and soldiers alike, lived the memory of what had been lost and what could yet be lost again. Pakistan's nuclear obsession was not born of bloodlust or bravado. It arose from an unquenchable need for dignity and survival, nations longing to heal its wounds by forging a weapon that could, finally, keep the demons of 1947 at bay. Chapter 3. A Nation's Alchemy, Dreaming the Impossible. If fear laid the foundation, it was hope and ingenuity that built upon it. The pursuit of nuclear capability in Pakistan became a tale of alchemy, of turning despair into resolve, of transforming academic inquiry into national salvation. Country's brightest minds were summoned, conscripted not for the battlefield, but for the silent, ceaseless war of science. In the late 1960s, the Ministry of Science and Technology became the new headquarters of Pakistan's unspoken ambition. While the nation's public face remained peaceful, its nuclear energy program, inaugurated with much fanfare and promises of progress behind closed doors, the calculus was shifting. Among the pioneers was Dr. Abdus Salam, a prodigy of theoretical physics and future Nobel laureate. Salam and others like him had harbored dreams of elevating Pakistan's status through peaceful nuclear energy, envisioning a nation that could light cities and cure diseases through the atom. But India's strides in nuclear research and growing international isolation forced their hand in drawing rooms thick with cigarette smoke and hope. Pakistan's scientific visionaries plotted a course fraught with peril. Their challenge was profound: to create a nuclear program from scant resources. Under the gaze of skeptical allies and intrusive foes, laboratories were ramshackle. Funding was unpredictable. Morale waxed and waned with the political fortunes of Islamabad. Yet impossibility became a muse, inspiring scientists and engineers to feats few thought achievable. A turning point arrived in 1972 when the new leader, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, summoned his brightest minds to the hill station of Multan. Under chilly skies and heavier spirits, he spoke with words that would echo through the decades. "We will eat grass, even go hungry, but we will get one of our own." It was less a promise than a challenge, a gauntlet cast at history's feet. Bhutto understood what this quest would mean: poverty alongside genius, sacrifice woven with secrecy. For the scientists, many of whom were still idealists at heart, the nuclear dream was both a curse and a calling. They worked in isolation, nervous that at any moment the world might discover and destroy their fragile progress. Western intelligence agencies circled incessantly, and friends were few. Some, like Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan, would emerge as controversial heroes. Others would toil, unsung, beneath the radio silence of classified projects. Resource scarcity was their constant companion. Equipment was fragile, and supplies were unreliable. The alchemy was literal as well as metaphorical. Scientists became smuggler diplomats, acquiring restricted materials and knowledge through obscure routes, sometimes at great personal risk. Every breakthrough, no matter how small, was celebrated as a triumph over fate. But the pursuit of the bomb was not about detonations or megatons. It was about pride, survival, and legacy. At test sites and secret bunkers, the men and women of Pakistan's nuclear program faced down the impossible. Each setback was met with renewed resolve. Every betrayal, a foreign supplier reneging, a secret intercepted, was countered by bold improvisation and relentless drive. This was the alchemy of a nation that dared to dream beyond its circumstances. In garages and labs, in hidden factories, and university corridors, the impossible was given chase, not merely to rival India, but to transform national despair into the energy of hope. The quest for the bomb became the nation's crucible, a trial by ambition, faith, and intellect. And in this crucible, the very identity of Pakistan was tempered, hammered, not just into a nuclear power, but into a nation convinced that, against every odd, the impossible could be alchemized into reality. Chapter 4. The Architects of the Apocalypse. No epic journey is undertaken by shadow alone. The architects of Pakistan's nuclear quest were men and women of formidable intellect and steely resolve. Scientists, soldiers, politicians, and spies who stared down the abyss and pressed onward, knowing what lay at the end of the path. In the annals of Pakistan's nuclear history, three names rise above the rest: Dr. Abdus Salam, the prodigious physicist; Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the charismatic leader; and Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan, the metallurgist, who would become a legend. Each was an architect driven by different demons, different dreams, but all united by a singular, daunting purpose. Abdus Salam was the conscience of the scientific dream. Trained at Cambridge, celebrated across the globe, Salam embodied this possibility that knowledge could serve humanity. Torn between his love for his homeland and his horror at its trajectory, he struggled to bridge the divide. Though his contributions were primarily to peaceful nuclear research, Salam's presence legitimized the early years of the program. When nuclear ambitions turned military, his role waned, but his belief in science as salvation remained a guiding light. Bhutto, by contrast, saw the bomb as the ultimate tool of political leverage. Charismatic and cunning, he intoned the rhetoric of national pride, the language of defiance, even when the cost seemed insurmountable. His summit at Multan became legendary. In that moment, the nation's fate was forever altered. Bhutto was not content to play second fiddle in the subcontinent or the world. He wanted Pakistan to be respected, feared, and never again humiliated by the horrors of partition or the debacles of war. He was the visionary who demanded the impossible and dared his countrymen to deliver. Then there was Abdul Qadir Khan, the enigmatic father of the bomb. His story was a blend of brilliance and bravado, defiance and controversy. Khan was a metallurgist, world-wise and ambitious, who returned to Pakistan from Europe bearing not just expertise but secrets, a blueprint for uranium enrichment, acquired through means both legal and illicit. He became the one man who, in the eyes of the world, personified Pakistan's nuclear project. Khan was tireless, often abrasive, and shrouded in secrecy. He marshaled his team beneath a veil of paranoia, always fearful of spies, sabotage, or betrayal. His work in Kahuta, a fortress laboratory in the hills outside Islamabad, became a legend whispered in diplomatic circles. Under his steely guidance, Pakistani scientists raced against time and the ever-watchful eyes of the world to spin uranium into the raw material of power. But there were others, too, whose contributions remain unsung engineers who gave up dreams of the West intelligence. Officers who risked everything to acquire forbidden knowledge, and countless laborers whose hands built the machines that would shape history. The architects of the apocalypse were not monsters. They were patriots, students, sons and daughters, driven by a colossal mixture of fear and hope. Each bore the tremendous burden of knowing that their work could ignite a conflagration, that the veiled fire they tended could, if unleashed, scorch not just their foes, but all they loved. They worked in silence, in secrecy, under pressure that would have shattered lesser spirits. And in that silence, Pakistan's nuclear saga moved from dream to dangerous reality, step by perilous step, at the hands of those who dared to architect fate itself. Chapter 5: Secrets Forged in Darkness. In the hush of the late 1970s, behind the iron gates of tightly guarded compounds and within the thick, claustrophobic air of state ministries, Pakistan's destiny was being recast. The quest for nuclear capability had moved from an urgent national ambition to a labyrinthine game one that played out in coded conversations, midnight flights, unmarked packages, and loyalists who pledged more than their lives to the cause. The world's eyes were elsewhere, dimly aware, yet not fully comprehending the surge of energy beneath Pakistan's modest facade. Only a trusted circle knew the true scale of the project. A handful of scientists, strategists, and a hierarchy of soldier politicians convinced that secrecy was the only shield powerful enough to deflect disaster. Each secret was a living thing, growing, twitching, demanding care and concealment. The architects of the program knew that even the slightest slip the wrong word, a missed detail, could unravel their entire undertaking. They adopted pseudonyms, covert codes, and built rival teams so no one person ever knew the full blueprint. Sometimes even the allies in power were left guessing, kept just on the outside of the narrative, protected perhaps, but also excluded from the shared risk. The acquisition of pivotal technology was its art form. Scientists like Abdul Qadir Khan, charismatic, brilliant, and overwhelmingly ambitious, became both assets and potential liabilities. Khan, who had slipped away from the Netherlands with blueprints spinning in his head, embodied the fire that could build or consume. Through a network that spanned continents, Europe, the Middle East, distant outposts in Southeast Asia, equipment, knowledge, and expertise flowed, bound not by borders, but by the fervor of a desperate mission. Diplomatic fronts became stages for elaborate misdirection. We pursue peaceful purposes, Pakistani officials assured the world, even as parts of uranium centrifuges arrived scattered in cargo. Friendships with China blossomed in whispered rooms, promises exchanged beneath heavy portraits of communists. Heroes of fellow nation wounded, too, by isolation, sought partnership, blending necessity with common defiance. Yet every success bred new dangers. For each scientist who joined, another's loyalty had to be doubly assured. The fear of spies, double agents, or simple human failure haunted every interaction. Bonds were tested. Friendships withered under suspicion. In coffee rooms and corridor meetings at Kahuta, trust was rationed, as precious as enriched uranium. Itself. Outside, rumors swirled. Western intelligence tried to pierce the veil, sending satellites overhead, sifting through intercepted calls, dangling bribes before the restless and the disenfranchised. Counterintelligence grew ruthless. Paranoia was not a sickness, but a survival tactic. From this darkness, the program took its true shape. Allies were cultivated as carefully as the technology they supplied. Betrayals for country or coin were punished without mercy. But a sense of brotherhood also emerged. Those within the circle molded by shared danger and an unspoken pact that Pakistan's fate resided in shadows, and only the resilient could survive. In the end, the deepest secret forged was not technological, but human, the realization that to wield the fire, one must become something other than what they were. In darkness, they had become both architects and inhabitants of a new Pakistan, one forever changed by what it dared to hide from the world and from itself. Chapter 6. The Race Against Time. The clock was relentless, its tick a ghost at every scientist's bench and security chief's desk. After India's nuclear test at Pokhran in 1974, Pakistan's time horizon shrank to mere moments, a single calendar page between vulnerability and invincibility. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, every external event, border skirmishes, political assassinations, diplomatic snubs, felt like a harbinger. For those at the heart of the nuclear program, nights blurred into days. Exhaustion was woven into purpose, and urgency became a way of life. At the hidden laboratories of Kahuta, rows of spinning centrifuges sang a metallic symphony. Every successful enrichment of uranium brought hope. Every failure gnawed with dread. Engineers and technicians lived in careful cycles of elation and defeat. Resources were always just short. Money, material, and the expertise to fuse them coalesced only under constant tension. A system built for success or spectacular failure, but never for rest. Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan moved like a force of nature, alternately inspiring and intimidating. His expectations were astronomical, his temper volcanic. No mistake was too small to escape his attention. No progress was too slow. Under his leadership, the team learned to improvise, substitute, camouflage, and when necessary, build working miracles from the most ordinary of parts. Political shields were equally important. Every few months saw a new threat of sanctions or exposure, a new reason for international partners to turn cold, a new leak to repair. The project's defenders in Islamabad played a deft game, balancing fealty to allyships with the United States, China, and the Muslim world, while never betraying the magnitude of progress underway. Meanwhile, every member knew that discovery could be fatal. An international embargo, economic collapse, or even a preemptive strike was always a headline away. The sense of racing against time was not a metaphor. It was an ache behind the eyes, a constant pulse beneath the skin. The human cost mounted. Scientists missed births, funerals, and weddings, sometimes vanishing from family for weeks or months. Only a hurried phone call to prove they were alive. Marriages frayed. Friendships collapsed. But in sacrifice, they found meaning. They were racing for the survival of millions, at least. That is what they told themselves. Final challenges came as a blur of unanticipated setbacks. A faulty centrifuge, a missing shipment, a scientist suddenly unwilling to continue. Moral doubts occasionally surfaced in the dead of night. Was this pursuit truly salvation, or a step into unending peril? But doubt had no place amid deadlines set not by calendars, but by the drumbeat of existential fear. Time, once measured in years, was now reckoned in mere days and hours. When, at last, the team succeeded in enriching enough uranium for a bomb, the relief was edged with terror. The finish line always shifted, revealing new barriers, but also an unparalleled sense of capability. They had outrun time, if only for a moment. What they would do with that moment would define not just their lives, but the fate of Pakistan itself. Chapter 7. Trial by Fire. The Birth of the Bomb. It was a May morning, oddly cool for Chagai's barren expanse, when history held its breath. At last, the years of sleepless nights, witty improvisations, impossible faith, and the price in personal ambition and national budget had come to a burning point. The bomb would be tested. The desert hills, ancient witnesses to endless wars and migrations, now stood ready to record the dawn of a new era. The preparations were a testament to human ingenuity and anxiety. Engineers sleeved wires through crumbling tunnels. Soldiers inched drums of high explosives under veils of secrecy. Instruments were aligned, triple-checked, then checked again. Some prayed, some recited equations. All felt the weight. If this experiment failed, Pakistan would collapse into ridicule and danger. If it worked, the world would change dot as dawn. Broke on May 28, 1998, the team huddled in a distant war room. The order was given. Fingers tightened on desks, hands clasped in prayer, breath stilled as the signal flowed, unseen, to that hidden core beneath the mountain. Time seemed unwilling to move. Then, all at once, light brighter than the sun, heat unyielding, a thunder. Across generations, the mountain yawned, roared, and fell strangely silent. The test's code-named Chagai would soon echo across continents. In those first minutes, triumph was not a cheer, but a stunned silence. Dr. Samar Mubarakman wiped his brow in disbelief. Abdul Qadir Khan quietly wept. Scientists hardened. Skeptics felt faith in themselves and their mission. Even the soldiers, usually stoic, allowed themselves a rare tenderness. For one heartbeat, the fears, betrayals, and secrecy of 2 long decades melted into pride. Yet nothing was simple. The team sped to analyze fallout, exchanged nervous glances, debating what story to tell the world and what truths to keep guarded. Orders flew. Announce nothing, then announce everything, then walk the impossible line between. When Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif addressed the world, his voice caught and soared. "We have settled the score," he intoned, "and we have emerged stronger." The world recoiled. Sanctions bit into Pakistan's economy, and some allies grew cold. But inside Pakistan, the moment was rapture. In mosques, markets, and living rooms, people cheered, wept, called their parents, and sang patriotic songs. For a people conditioned to humiliation, geographic peril, and existential fear, victory tasted of fire and honey. It as evening fell on Chagai, and scientists gathered in a brief and battered celebration. The old doubts crept in. Had they created a new dawn, or doomed their children to forever walk in its shadow? The bomb was not merely a machine. It was possibility, power, and the promise of ever more difficult choices. The world's gaze became sharper, less forgiving. But for one day, in the white-hot desert, Pakistanis felt themselves forged anew children of the veiled fire they had willed into being. Chapter 8. Legacy and Shadows. The Burden of Power. When the euphoria faded, shadows stretched long behind the brilliance of the bomb. Possession of nuclear weapons changed Pakistan's reality, in strategy, in politics, and in the very marrow of its national psyche. Internally, pride jostled with anxiety. Nuclear status brought global attention and a new kind of respect, but also relentless scrutiny, suspicion, and the perpetual dread of catastrophe. Every government that followed, civilian or military, became a custodian of secrets, more potent than any leader's ambition. Each prime minister and army chief, on entering office, received the legacy. Coded briefings, carefully hemmed in by layers of protection, their weight as heavy as any crown. Internationally, the rules shifted. Pakistan could no longer plead weakness. It had become a player in a perilous game. Some allies applauded quietly, while others watched with open mistrust. The threat of preemptive strikes, subversion, or impossible demands lurked at every diplomatic engagement. Economic sanctions loomed, only slightly softened by underground alliances and shared grievances. But the deepest legacy was psychological. For scientists and soldiers, the bomb became both shield and curse. Many who had labored in darkness found themselves unable to speak of their greatest achievement, even to their families. Some retreated from public life, their triumphs quietly, transforming into burdens. A generation grew up with bomb parades, nuclear metaphors in textbooks, and a simmering dread that no celebration could vanquish. With time, doubts mounted. Had the veiled fire brought true security or locked Pakistan in an unending cycle of distrust and competition? The region's arms race only grew more fevered. Social needs, education, and health often shrank before the towering demands of strategic deterrence. Yet for every misgiving, another flame burned, a hope that by holding the fire, Pakistan had ensured not only its own survival, but the chance, perhaps one day, to shape the destiny of South Asia, not by fear, but by wisdom born of sorrow and strength. The burden endured, echoing across generations. The veiled fire was now woven into the nation's soul, its pain, and sometimes its pride. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy.